the idea of having it in a workspace I was comfortable with, because it didn't look like they were that threatening. They were cobotic in nature. And now here we go. It's, it's also cobotic in nature. They've cleaned it all up and they put it on a 10-kilo diet. It's amazing.
Lost some weight. Yeah, I was saying that there's a lot of humans that would probably appreciate having losing 10 kilos. So.
Yeah, well, let's find out what the Optimus diet plan is.
Well, it looks like basically just remove your
squats.
weight.
Do a lot of squats.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's clearly a squat program.
Squats,
so
yep.
Squat and eating lots of eggs. Hey, y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I am with Dr. Scott Walter auf Deutschland. So,
willkommen. Auf der Schweiz.
Oh, you're in Switzerland right now.
Wir kommen aus, grüß dich aus Zürich.
Cool. Not skiing right now then, obviously, since you're down in the valley. So, cool. So Scott, you have been the belle of the ball. The night that the new TeslaBot video came out, I think it was like 8 or 9 o'clock Eastern time. And of course that would be 2 o'clock in the morning, your time. So you were well asleep, and Herbert was writing me and Brian was like, people were just like, where's Scott? And I was like, the poor guy's sleeping, man, let him sleep. He's in Europe. So anyway, you missed all the festivities, but over the next couple of days, you have been very, very popular and been on a lot of shows.
Yeah. So I basically, I was able to get up when you guys were asleep and then look at all your videos and try to figure out what you got right or wrong in them. And I would say most of the takes were pretty good.
Right.
And then I spent the next day just like one after another. In one case, while on a train, another case while, walking through a damp countryside.
and go Europe for having Wi-Fi and really good connectivity out in
it was actually very good. So Swisscom is a pretty good telecom here. I haven't had any issues, and I haven't run out of minutes yet or anything like that. And very cool. It's been very good.
Awesome. And so thank you so much for joining us while you're on your vacationing trip and everything. So we are going to talk about judging a book by its cover, because I think in this one case, we can make an argument that at least that's our angle into this, to say something new about the whole Optimus thing. But before we start, there should be a video that's already out by the time you see this, where me and Bradford Ferguson from Rebellionaire talk about the it's not a copyright strike. It is a monetization. I don't know. Anyway, it's basically Univision, which is a large Spanish TV station that's, I believe, owned by NBC, if I've got that correct.
Legacy Media. Let's call it what it is.
Legacy Media has abused. In fact, in the background behind you, I've got the Digital Millennium copyright summary up on Wikipedia. They basically have abused that. Not a lawyer, in my opinion, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, as far as I can tell, they've abused the Digital Millennium Copyright Act to try to make a quick buck on this video.
Well, it's worse than that. It's also theft of intellectual property, because they are claiming that the Tesla video is their property.
Right.
No. John, we have more ownership over that copyright as Tesla shareholders than they do.
That's actually true.
So so basically their actions are not only abusing that, but it is basically tortious interference between YouTube and the creators. They're coming in the middle, and they're interfering with a contract between them, which is basically what they're doing by making a claim which is fallacious. It's theft of someone else's IP, claiming it's yours. I mean, let's talk about plagiarism. That's exactly what it is. And just because they stole let's call it what it is. They stole the Tesla video, put it in a news broadcast, are claiming it's their own. And now anyone else that uses that Tesla video, which is free to use, there, especially for commentary, and they're claiming it's their own. And it's not the first time they've done that. It's happened to Dirty Tesla a few times before, where he used clips from Tesla videos in there, and Univision came in and did a copyright strike on him. The other thing to remember is that this TeslaBot hot take that everyone is doing is very time sensitive. Yes. So a lot of people, they wanted to get it out urgently, and every hour that they were missing is views that they were missing. Univision denied them of that capability of doing that with this. This is a tort, because there are a lot that have been affected, and we're going to find out.
I will throw in.
I mean, 3 of the videos that I was in have been struck. Okay. And we're going for 4 right now, aren't we?
Right. Yeah, I know. Right. It's like, So somehow
Yeah.
I managed to avoid it, and we were talking about that, and it's possible it's because I did it in an X window and had my face in the corner the whole time, and so maybe that adjust. I don't know, but anyway,
It is, but it seems
it
like
might also just be
what
lucky.
Tesla Fix had to do is he found out he had to like delete a few frames here and there, and whatever they were claiming were theirs, and it definitely wasn't. I mean, he did
Right.
not download the unit. He's never seen the Univision video. I don't
Right.
watch
That's the thing, is
Univision.
that we haven't even
That's
seen
like,
it.
yes, it's not even in our language, so why would we
Right.
watch it?
Right.
You know, so that's the thing that's kind of crazy. So the fact that they've done this a few times means that they are definitely have very poor procedures in place, and YouTube is allowing them to get away with that in a way that they should not be.
Oh,
So both of
yeah.
them have to go ahead and change it. And the fact that they've done it before means they are aware of it. They've been told of it because YouTube has had to interfere before. They should have been notified, like, look, you're doing this wrong. You better clean up your act. And
Right.
it can't be automatic. You can't say we've got some AI doing it. From now on, you do it. There has to be a human that has to go in there, and you have to tell us exactly what it is. And you need to write an affidavit that says the source material is yours, that
Yeah.
you are actually
Yeah.
declaring under penalty of law that this is my property, and you're going
Right.
to state that to YouTube. And no, this doesn't happen. This is legacy media trying to squelch the voices
Right.
of the little guys. That's clear. That's what it's doing. And this is why when I heard about it, I was pretty furious.
Yeah.
And then when
As
Brad,
are we
the
all.
video I did with Bradford, he got pretty furious.
Right.
But
So
don't piss off Bradford, because Bradford,
Yeah.
he comes with full guns blazing, because as soon as it happened to him, he sought legal advice. And
Right.
so right now he is actually asking anyone that's been affected by that to DM, give him a
Yeah.
DM, going to create the big case. And this is going to be a test case, because this is finally a shot across the bow at legacy media. Stop doing this to us.
Well, it's also a shot across the bow of the DMCA, because that is just, it's
That's
a
also-
terrible, terrible law.
It shows how it's abused.
It unbalanced
It's
the
abused.
entire playing field.
There should be a penalty. And the thing is that, what YouTube, and YouTube's a little bit to blame, because they just take it on their word. And the fact that they've been wrong before, they should say, wait a minute, we're going to put a procedure in place to make sure you guys don't screw up again. They are screwing up. So it's a little bit on YouTube. So I think YouTube's going to get pulled into
So
it.
actually, I will tell you, so everybody watch the video. It's up here. I'll put a link to it. But Bradford actually went through the procedure on live with me and walked through the procedure and clicked it. And they basically, YouTube absolves themselves. They say, we're going to pass this on. Univision can then respond to you. We have nothing to do with it.
They tried it, but the thing is, they're well aware of it, that they have to be also doing strikes against those. So the thing is, if you have a copyright strike against you, and you collect enough of them, bam, suddenly you are no longer.
Oh yeah, it's 3 strikes.
It has to work both ways.
Gone.
It has to work that Univision, wait a minute, just because they're legacy media doesn't mean we should trust them. We know you cannot trust a word that they say. And in this case, we can see that they're lying about the content belonging to them.
Right.
So there should be strikes against them.
This is like a simple case too. It's like, you can't possibly claim this is yours. This is clearly
the other thing is they're escrowing. They're trying to escrow the money. They're trying to escrow the money from them.
That's what they did.
They're trying to say. And what they can do is potentially say that money belongs to us. So Tim Dodd has talked about this before, that he's like a long video, and someone comes in and claims some narrow slice of like 2 bars of music that was picked up. And they want like the whole monetization. So well, wait a minute, it shouldn't be. And it's almost like first come, first serve. So if someone gets the strike first, they get all the money that Tim Dodd would have got, rather than saying, well, why don't you get 2 seconds out of like the whole hour, and like there's someone else that comes in there. And the other thing that's happened is there have been bad actors out there that are claiming NASA footage is theirs because they ran it on their YouTube.
Wow.
And someone goes back to NASA, gets the original NASA, and they're saying, oh, wait a minute, this is ours, this is ours. So there are a lot of bad actors, and what they have to do is these bad actors not only have to have strikes against them, that if it turns out that they were a bad actor, there should be penalties to them, that the amount of money, it's like a 3x kind of thing. This person lost, $1,000 of monetization. You therefore, it's going to cost you 3,000. And then people will start thinking twice about that. So there has to be some penalties in place for the bad actors that are going on there.
Right.
And also, I mean, the other thing I look at this is that there was the recall, which we know is an over-the-air update. It wasn't recall at all. It was Tesla deciding to add, more annoyances to that, just to make the NTS was it the NTSB or
NHTSA.
NHTSA. It's just to get the whole thing out of the way. So it's actually in a sense a positive story, but it was spun by legacy media.
Right.
Again, it's a negative story.
There was actually somebody on the news was actually smart. They said, hey, the iPhone 15 came out and there was a software update that came out afterwards to fix a problem, and they called it an update, not a recall. So it's like it's the same thing.
It's the same thing, same thing. So you have that news, and then you have the TeslaBot news landing the same day. Now, what's ended up happening is that you've got a lot of people trying to promote it out there to Tesla's benefit, and now they've been denied to do that. Okay, so I think that also as a shareholder of Tesla, I can feel that. Wait a minute, that affects us as well.
No, and I think that's how Tesla can get involved in this. Number one, because it's their copyrighted material, but number two, the tort is that they have also been harmed because they're non-marketing. They don't pay advertising.
Yeah,
we do
it's an injury. A tort is injury, and part of it is everything from physical injury to emotional industry.
Or financial, because
financial. Yes,
you're not getting the word out as much.
And especially when it basically can almost be shown to be intentional, because they know what they're doing. They've done it in the past, and they've got to put their standards and procedures. They've got to clean up their act. And usually that's what ends up happening when companies, something bad, they keep screwing up. The court comes in there and says, no, you're not getting away with this anymore. It's very clear right now. We're going to write down all the steps you're going to go through. And if you do this, you'll be okay. But if you don't, you're in violation. And now next time you're going to be slammed really hard. So
let's hope.
Let's hope that, and I think, between Bradford getting involved, and then, maybe Tesla will get involved with their legal team and really because the thing is, we've been trying to tell legacy media, we've had enough of your shenanigans. We know what's going on. That's what X has been all about, is making it very clear. So let's hope it goes forward.
Yep. I do too. I actually think the thing is that Univision, if they were smart, would back off this entire thing immediately, but it doesn't appear, because Bradford had to go through the procedure. So at least a half an hour ago when he did it, or an hour ago when he did it with me, it was still active. They had not withdrawn that claim. But that means that Tesla's legal team has a pretty I think they have a clear road to support. If there's any kind of suit that's brought, they can definitely be what is that called? A co-claimant or something,
a litigant,
litigant.
A litigant,
which means they can bring their legal team on board, which is a hefty legal team.
All you need is to have some reason for you to be in there. And it's yes, there's been a tort against us, that there has been negative media coverage, and there was a loss of this other opportunity here. And the other thing is, YouTube's getting pulled into it no matter what they want to, because Dirty Tesla said it had happened to him before, but he's trying to find the emails when it happened to the Univision before, and I just got to laugh. It's like, don't worry, YouTube is going to have to supply those emails in the discovery process. So they're going to have this huge headache that they're going to have to go through, and they're going to have to find every single creator that has ever been impacted by the fact that Univision made a false copyright claim. Univision's going to have they're just looking at a huge headache right now. Even if it doesn't go forward, they have to come up with all the discovery.
Oh, the discovery is going to be nightmarish. Okay, so let's turn to something way more fun and positive, which is the video, which hopefully will not get a monetization strike against it.
Strike. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to, with some hesitancy, share my screen now.
Okay, and we want to talk our way through.
Yeah, let's talk our way through this video.
Okay, so let's give credit where credit is due.
Yes,
this is from Tesla. Univision. Okay, thank you, Univision, for making this
available. Do not say this is from Univision. We'll definitely get a strike in that case. So one thing I'm doing is I'm definitely turning off the sound, and hopefully that will. Anyway, so
now, but before you start this, do you remember? It was a little over 2 years ago when the TeslaBot was first announced, the very, very first announcement.
Yes.
We didn't see the whole TeslaBot. I mean, I think it's the way that they do a lot of their marketing videos. You only saw little bits of it.
Right.
This is very reminiscent of that video, and a lot of it looks very similar to the original TeslaBot concept.
Right. Yeah, one thing that we really don't get access to is an image of the back of the bot, which I would love to see.
We get a little bit, and there's two images that we see that are a little bit different that I'll try to point out.
Okay.
So we don't see a good back of it.
Like I said, we're going to talk about how you can judge a book by its cover. So we'll take that angle into it. And the first thing that I want to talk about with the cover is literally the cover. So here you can see the feet or the shoes or whatever close up. There is some sort of mesh material here and a kind of a rubberized, plasticized thing. So what can you make out of, let's just start with the feet, because that's the first view we get of the
The
bot.
first thing we get is that those are not the same old feet. So something has changed there. Yes.
No. Yeah.
And the other thing you might be able to see is that it looks like there are some cabling going into the feet. So that's
Oh, like
indicating that
over on
there's
the
something
left
going
foot
on
over here.
below the ankle. Yes. So you're seeing, aha, there seems to be a cable down there now. Why is that in there?
Right. And also, I believe that this soft material also, we see this later, that he does a toe off. So we no longer have that rigid flat foot that doesn't have the ability to bend at the foot knuckle. So, so this softer material allows the underlying structure to bend, and also again makes it more cobot, because you don't have potential places a little kid could stick their finger and get it pinched or something like that. So yeah, so that's definitely a benefit of that. And then moving on, we get some knees. Anything you want to say about the knees?
Well, the covering on the knees. So we see the kneecaps are being covered up a little bit more. We could see a little bit of still the actuators that are down that are kind of the calf muscle area, but definitely looks different than what we've seen before, more refined.
Yeah, and very, very attractive. Again, the whole thing looks just so much more elegant than the old version. And then of course we got hands.
Yeah. The hand looks a lot like the original design hand.
Right.
Just kind of sleekness in there, not exactly like it, but definitely a second generation of the hand design they came up with. So it seems to be moving more towards the original concept.
Yeah. And of course, the mechanisms and everything, a lot of stuff. I haven't really looked too much at the wrist before, but it looks like at least what would that be? The roll joint here. It looks like it has been moved maybe
actually, no, the roll joint's way behind it.
Oh, is it? So it's in the middle. So this is just,
so that's still pitch and yaw. It's a little bit hard to see, but we'll see in some of the other images is how it comes through a little bit better.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, and then again, cobot stuff, you've got potential for the force actuators on the second pad and also on the third pad.
The force sensors. Yep. So possibility that you've got touch sensors there.
Right. And then of course we've got an actual mesh covering and everything, which functional now. So
for the neck.
And as you pointed out, the Tesla logo, I noticed that Lars, he snagged your thing that said that you don't put the logo on until you're ready to ship the product. So,
Lars from Best
in Tesla. He just did a video about the TeslaBot. So he said that.
Okay, good. Yep.
But anyway, but I mean, we're definitely looking at something that is Tesla branded now. And of course we get the beautiful LED light bar around the head, which is very elegant looking, I think. So, and then we get a full shot of the guy. Sorry about the bar across the bottom. I don't know how to get rid of that when doing X stuff. And I am not going to go to YouTube because I really don't want to use it. So exactly. So anyway, a very impossibly thin waist. I bet there's a lot of people out there that wish they had a waist that was that thin. It's white, maybe plastic. Do you think it's like an ABS type of plastic or?
Yeah, definitely plastic covering. The question is whether the structure is made out of plastic. So they all the covers are some kind of they could be 3D printed right now, but I'm sure it's going to be injection molded. These may have even been injection molded. You never know if they're scaling up. They may already have the molds ready for that. And then of course the pelvic area looks a little bit different. It's not as busy as it used to be.
Yes.
And seems to be thinner overall. Definitely.
And the girdle looks like it only goes across the back now as opposed to
yes. They don't have it in the front. So they've decided that they can make it a little bit, maintain the stiffness that they needed with a very, simpler design back there.
Yeah. And so you actually wonder if potentially maybe we'd always assumed this was aluminum, I think, but maybe if they've reduced this, they've made it kind of a steel plate. So it's really, really rigid.
It's possible. It's possible, man. Now, there is one other thing I want us to kind of look at that I didn't mention in the other videos. And so if anyone's looking for like, oh, what's a new point that we're going to come up with? If you've watched all the others, is if you look at the inside of the elbow right now, so you see the black patch around the elbow.
Right.
Can you kind of see where the elbow joint is?
Yep.
Okay. Do you notice that most of the black patch is in the lower arm rather than the upper arm?
Yes.
And when I was looking at that, I was thinking, that's curious. Why do they have so much of that fabric? Because that basically is a fabric covering there on the lower part rather than the upper part. Now, one of the first things I was wondering is like, oh, have the kinematics changed at all? Are they disguising some things that they're doing differently that we can't tell? Is that a completely new shoulder or something like that? And looking at the motion of the shoulder, it's like, no, I think it's the same shoulder. It's just lighter, tighter actuators, and they've covered it up a little bit more, and they've been able to get the cabling through it. Because one of the first things was almost instantly before there's any movement, it's like, oh, I don't see any cables. And then you begin to see the head movement, which is, of course, the new thing, is that the head wasn't moving before. But the elbow, I was just kind of wondering about that. Are they doing something a little bit different in the elbow? I wanted to know whether they decided to go to a rotary joint there, or if they're still using kind of the piston and rod being able to move it. And I thought, did they change the order? Did they actually put the actuator on the lower arm rather than the upper arm? Because it was always in the upper arm before, and the push bar that was coming down, that linkage mechanism, was connected to the lower arm.
Right.
And it would only make sense to have the covering that way is if the actuator, the big part, is in the lower area rather than the upper area. But I wasn't ready to go out on a limb on that. And in a second, we're going to see why I decided to go out on a limb on this now.
Okay. And then, of course, the other thing is that there's also something that a human doesn't have, but there's like is that yaw? Whatever.
Yeah. Well, you do kind of have that because we have a ball joint, but that's like the third rotation. That's kind of the redundancy that most industrial robots don't have there. And that is it's technically the third axis, but a lot of people would call that the seventh axis because it's the one that you never needed before and suddenly gets thrown in there.
Right.
And it does rotate about that. So that's kind of I think they call that the shoulder roll.
Yeah. And
then of course
the fact that it turns its head was the moment when I was watching this video originally where I went, oh, because it looks very similar to the concept, but then all of a sudden the head started moving. And that it's amazing how much that changes things because it makes it much more human, much less uncanny valley.
Yes. And notice when it moves its head, the body kind of moves along with it.
Yes, exactly.
And the question, and look at that. When we move our heads, there's one way we can look at the side. We can just move our heads. But normally when you move our heads, our shoulders tend to go with it.
Right.
And it's because to really turn your head a lot, that hurts. If I want to see something over there, it actually helps to get a little bit in there. So I'm almost keeping my head straight. And look at, its shoulders also kind of fall there, almost like it's deciding it is a little bit easier to look to that side of being able to move the whole body. And so you kind of wonder, is it doing that because it's somehow a low energy state? It's something to do with balance? Or is it
could also be the
training? If the training, it just observing, oh, this is how a human moves. So they would do that because to me, it would seem mechanically, it would be easier just to go, there's no reason to do that.
But that's also not like I was saying, there's an uncanny valley aspect of this, and you don't want the robot. You don't want to do the Exorcist where the head just spins around.
Yeah. Now there is one thing. I think you told me this. Wasn't there like some scene in Terminator when the robot like turns its head very early on?
Yeah.
And there was something about the way it was done with the animation that they moved the shoulders or something else. There was a way that they did it because either they wanted to seem more human-like or they wanted to seem more machine-like. There was like a variation in there, and part of it is like a robot would just move its head. A human would move its head and shoulders.
I think we saw that in particular in Terminator 2 with Robert Patrick, who was like the T-1000. Anyway, he very carefully, I remember, reading an interview or something like that, where he like tried to make his movements not human. So he would do things like only move his head or, so that there wasn't this other part to make it feel less realistic. Yeah. Less human. Anyway,
that's one of the first things you see picking it up. And then of course, what has also been pointed out by others is that what does Optimus then do next? It comes up and examines its hands.
Right.
And that's also kind of a trope.
Well, actually it looks up first, which is really cool because we get two axes of motion.
Looks up. So so you can see you have the two axes. You don't have the third axis. You don't have the one that like I like to say would be for being able to properly header a ball.
Right. Well, I was calling it the 16-year-old thing. It's that cynical, like your parents tell you to do something and you're like,
you can't do that. Okay. Exactly.
Can't do the head tip, but it can't do a header, can't be a cynical 16-year-old, but I mean, generally speaking, this is really, I mean, that's quite beautiful. And it's got,
it's extremely human-like, human-like.
Right. It looks so much like iRobot because if I'm remembering correctly, the Will Smith movie, they actually had that really exceptionally thin waist on those too. So kind of
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah. Now,
But
as
we
far
still
as
have never seen this.
as far as the
Hey,
kinematics
yeah,
on the pelvis, I don't think that's changed. I still think it's kind of the same order of operations going on, even though it
right,
looks very different. It's not a new pelvis. It's
right,
not a new wrist. It's not a new ankles. It's not a new leg or hip joints or anything like that. The only thing
right.
that's new is the head movement.
Yeah.
And the thing to point out on that head movement, and this is something I suspected, is that if you look at the roll in the wrist, so we're going to
Mhm.
see that it does a roll in the wrist, and it basically rolls the entire lower arm.
Yeah.
So just past the elbow, there's a point of rotation there, and there's a little servo in there. And remember, they designed 6 new actuators, 3 rotational and 3 linear. And then they have a really tiny one on there, the one with the lowest torque. And it's
Right.
only used in that one place in the whole robot.
Right.
Whereas the others, like the shoulder, there's the 3 of them that are in the shoulder are identical, and it's again used in the leg. So it's like in 4 places, just on one
Yeah.
side. In other words, 8
Yeah.
total throughout the whole thing. That
Right.
actuator gets a lot of use. And even the really big actuators, that the rotary ones, they need 3 of them in there because they show up in the pelvic area, and they seem to be important. And I was like, well, wait a minute, why does this show up only in one place? Why doesn't it have dual use? And I think it's because they probably designed it also for the neck, but then they didn't need it for the neck.
Oh,
And the neck
but
does
now they
not
do.
require a whole lot of
Now
torque.
they
Now
do.
they do. So I
Yeah.
suspect that what was being used, the servo that's there, is now showing up in the neck.
Right. That
And
makes
that's why,
sense 'cause it's gonna
remember they
weigh-
had like all those weird protuberances on it. It's like, why? I mean, you don't need all that stuff. It looks really weird that they
Right.
have these things sticking out on that design that aren't being used. There's nothing going through it. There's nothing being bolted on there. What's it there for? Well, it's there for another purpose somewhere else.
Right. And let's just take a moment to appreciate that all of the power and control systems that go to the legs have to go through this little tiny. So it's not just the actuator. There's got to be some cabling that's going
There's
between
some
the top
cabling, and we
bottom.
might see a little bit behind it. So I think there is still like a little cable loop, but they found a way to elegantly route a lot of it through there.
Right.
And we're going to understand how they improve the routing. That's going to be coming up. And so we'll probably go ahead and maybe let it guide us on what to say next. Okay.
Yeah. Oh,
Actuators
actually,
and
let's turn
sensors.
back and look at the way it rolls its wrist around.
Yes.
So if I can go real slowly here.
So yeah, you can kind of
Open.
see what it's doing there on the rolling of the wrist. Exactly. Now it's a little hard if you might not be able to see it easily on the right hand, or sorry, that's the left hand. If you look at the right hand, you see that little loop there?
Yeah.
You can see a little piece of cable there. Every now and then when you see it, you will see that cable kind of extend a little bit and move around. So they have just the right amount of cable to allow that movement.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So this little extra bit allows it to make that roll.
Yeah. Right. Now they've got it set up. Now take your arm and put it out there and try rotating like your thumb all the way to the left and then all the way back around. You will have a hard time doing a full 360.
Oh yeah, I can't come close.
So I don't think they're doing a full 360 there either. I think they're keeping it to like, 320 or something like that. So that means they don't need to have a lot of cable because it's not going to keep wrapping and wrapping and wrapping. They don't want it to. So they've probably restricted it to whatever it needs. Maybe it's even just plus, 270 total, plus or minus 135.
Right.
So they figured out what the cable loop has to be to extend through there.
Yep. So yeah, but anyway, it produces a very elegant hand motion in an engineering efficient way because there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, you can see in here in this cutout that looks like, is that one? It's one large actuator and there's one.
Oh, there's two.
There's
two actuators in there. There's
well, right, but there's one on this side and one on this side.
One on that side, exactly, and plus the power that has to get there through that cable.
Yeah.
And so they found an interesting way to split off of that to get the power into it and to get
again,
into the wrist.
all the power has to go, not power necessarily, but at least I don't know if there's any, but at least you have to have some tendons or whatever it is to be able to pull.
Well, actually, the servos for the hand are in the palm.
Right.
So there are 6 tiny servos in the palm.
Right.
1 for each of your fingers and 2 for your thumb. And so you've got like one like this, like that, like that, like that, and then there's like another one that goes across this way for the thumb.
Right. Which
So
you can
that's all
actually
packaged
see
in
because
there.
that part is actually exposed. It's like a silver sort of barrel.
Yep. You can get a little idea of kind of where it is. And if you look closely, there will be a couple of examples when you go in there, and anyone that's going through it themselves, you will sort of see when the fingers are closing, you might be able to see what looks like the tendons going through that allow it to clasp down. Now, the hand is much better than before, because remember before, sometimes the hand opened up, it would like kind of partially open up, or the fingers wouldn't get there, or they would stay stuck and
Yeah.
suddenly they would pop open. It looks like they've done something to mechanisms to make sure that it opens more gracefully. Maybe they're able to give it a little bit of a nudge to come back, but most of the opening force, and we'll be able to see it when we look close-ups in the hand, you will see in each of the knuckles, there is a torsion spring in there that allows it to pop open.
Right.
Okay. Now, this is important. Actuators, integrated electronics, and harnessing. So they are using actuators to help route some of the power through probably that actuator to the next one that's attached to it downstream. And that's something I was suspecting that they would do and was hoping they would do. That's like, oh, okay, you know, route it through there, and they've probably figured out a pretty clever way to do it. So that reduces the harnessing, and then also the exposure of it. You're still going to have a little bit here and there that you have to route it through some of your moving joints, but at least you can get rid of a lot of the major exposure.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's, again, that's what I was talking about with the waste, you know, because you don't have to waste any extra space routing cables if you can route it through the actuator. So very impressive. And again, if you watch the feet here, it looks a little bit cartoonish, that it's like a little clown footish, but as it does it, you can just see the toe off. And it's a little one.
So you're going to see the heel. So you'll see a heel strike there, and there is one coming up where we're going to see a really good toe off. So it gets a little bit better here, and then we're going to get a nice close up right after this. You can clearly see the toe off there. You can see that
but you can also see that there's an extra bend. There's an extra. Now, I'm sure it's a passive joint, but it's something that probably has a spring that resets it back to
Yes. And they kind of clarify that coming up here in a second. Okay, so 30% walk speed. So we're going to remember that speed boost. And we can see, okay, right there, you can see the right there. Okay, and you can see how the heel strike was there. We got the toe off. And then that's the reason we're seeing the cabling going through there. If you look at the foot that's completely flattened down, you'll see that there's like some cabling running along the shin bone, kind of. You can see that.
Oh, here?
Yeah, right there. Yeah, so you can see that's what goes down in there. And that is just for the sensors. It's not for power or anything like that. It's just for the sensors. And so they have sensors, obviously torque force sensors around there to get an idea of the foot position, probably to calculate the center of pressure. And they say articulated toe sections. Okay. So what that means is that each of the toe sections in each foot, like what you would be able to see in your normal shoes or your sneakers, it's able to articulate, which means it's just able to bend, and it's not actuated. It's not powered. It's completely passive, but more than likely they have some sort of compliance mechanism there, or spring or something like that, that absorbs the energy and gives it back. So with this much more natural movement, they're getting 30% boost in walking speed. Now, they didn't say that, you know, whether it requires more or less power. I'm pretty sure it means same power levels as before, 30%. And that would make sense, because humans have evolved to be able to walk and run very efficiently. And that's why we have the stride the way we have. There's all these little tricks to give us a little bit of extra energy savings in there, because the reality is life is an energy crisis. That's all. It's
a good way to think about it.
Yes, it's so everything is sort of optimized to be able to minimize the amount of energy you use, so you are then able to consume whatever you need to have. And so that's why all these systems have evolved to be able to make sure their gates and everything are as efficient as possible. And so this is giving you improvement, partly because of that, and what we'll see in a second, something to do with weight savings. Now, I'm not sure. I think there's might be one more bullet point they have on here. Do they? Okay, human foot geometry. Okay, so basically it looks like a human foot. Absolutely.
Now, still as it walks, you can see it's got the it's got the toddler with a full diaper sort of look going on. It's like sort of squatty, so it's not quite standing up straight. But
it's pretty good. And now we're going to stop here for a second, because I remember said hold the thought about the elbow. This over here is the first time we see it with the covers off. So over in the upper left corner, we can see, and the first thing we're going to see is that now that they have an articulated head,
that's as big as it gets.
You no longer have the head connected solidly to the torso like it was before. It was originally there. Remember, they used to harness it by opening up the scalp and putting in there. Now you don't want to do that, because you get the actuators that are going to be all bobbly head. And also that means all the load's going to go through there, and you don't want that. The actuator is designed to carry the load of the head, not the whole body. So we can see what they probably have is they have some sort of the harnessing hooks in the back. that they will then use when they need to hold it up, or if they are when they want to make sure it doesn't fall over. And I think
Right.
we'll see a little bit of where that is. But the main thing is the covers are exposing the shoulder a little bit, and it's too low resolution.
Yeah.
But I was looking as closely as possible, and you can kind of do a screen grab of that and try blowing it up. And then everyone can decide for themselves whether they think they are seeing the black actuator down here in the lower part of the arm, or in the upper part. And it's so grainy, it's hard to tell, but it almost seems to me like they flipped it around.
Huh.
And that's
And that would
why we
explain why you
see
have
the
the
black cover, why you have more of the black cover, because that's where it's kind of articulating out, and you need to give it the opening in order for it to be able to make that movement.
Right.
I could be wrong because the resolution is really bad, but that's why I'm willing to kind of like step out on a limb and say, I think it's the same elbow mechanism, but flipped around.
Very interesting. And yeah, there's a lot going on in the shoulder. I mean, you can see it's like there's
it looks the same. I mean,
yeah,
it's the actuators are different. You know, you can't get enough. I'd love to get more detail to see what the actuators look like.
Right.
But we can see that it is 3 serial actuators, kind of in the same fashion as before. That hasn't changed.
This also might explain why a lot of the Opticons suddenly appeared, because they might have been like, we're on to Gen 2, so let's just dump the ones that we had for Gen 1 out to the public and let them see it.
As a matter of fact, I walked by the Tesla shop here in Zurich, and there is an Opticon in there.
Oh, cool. Well, there you go.
Yep. So they're in Europe as well.
Oh, there we go. We finally do get a little bit of a look at the back. Yeah.
Yes. So stop right there. That gets into, first of all, they said they reduced 10 kilograms.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Which is, so that's a lot they get. Now, where do they get some of that? They may have got it by changing out materials. And I wasn't sure, but it seems that a lot, you know, Hans and Larry and others are trying to think about that as well. And they think it could be some sort of injection molded plastic now for what would be kind of the bony structures.
Oh, so the internal structure. Because
the legs,
obviously
you
you
see,
lose some
look at the
weight
lower
by
leg. You see the lower leg, that's all it's white down there. That's not, that does not look aluminum unless it's painted aluminum.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's possible that that is injection molded plastic, but my concern is, will the injection molded plastic be able to handle the anchor points for the hinges?
Yeah.
Because that's going to be a lot of cycling going on there. And this is why I'm going back and forth between, is it some sort of polyurethane that they've got down there? Is it just, is it a hollowed out aluminum that they've made lighter? You know, certainly from the pelvis area, they reduced that mass a little bit by making that a little bit different. But it's possible that they are, you know, maybe they've figured out how to do it and get the rigidity that they need out of it. They don't need super rigidity.
Yeah.
And they're not using carbon composites because that would just be too costly and everything else.
Exactly.
So they're either using aluminum, maybe magnesium. Larry had thought maybe they could be using magnesium. I'm not quite so sure about that. But, you know, or maybe they just found a really good polymer that, and another way to be able to mount the actuators on there without it resulting in wear and tear that would wear out after like a month or two. Now, if you look in the back, in the small of the back, there seems to be some sort of white element in there. And I'm not sure what that white element is.
Yeah.
Because we're going to see the back again, and we're going to see it's not there.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
And people had, in fact, I think complained about the fact that the red button wasn't there anymore, but it looks like there might be this little cantilevered thing out here. So
maybe there's something, but there's clearly isn't like the red e-stop button, because an e-stop button is red for a reason, so you can see it. There isn't something that says that you can make it black. It's like, if you're going to have an on-off button, it's going to be black. It's going to be like a red button that you would hit.
But anyway, you can see, so there's like a rear plate here, which would be the battery pack, probably, I believe, would be mounted towards the back, and then the compute functions would be mounted.
I think it's similar. It's probably the same number of batteries as before. I don't see that there'd be any reason for them to like radically change the torso, except they may have made some refinements to it. So I'm assuming it's still 140 2170s.
Yeah.
And that's still 52-volt architecture, and there's still the FSD in there. And I'm sure they just came up with, you know, better ways of packaging it and doing a few other things.
And I believe that, didn't we get an actual official statement that the FSD computer is now being cooled liquidly? I believe at first it was air cooled, but like with Bumblebee and Bumblebee, but now it's
Yeah, that I don't know. So whether they're using that, because maybe that's the case in the car. I don't know if that's also the case in the bot. It could be. It could
well,
be.
it would just because otherwise you're going to have such an radical amount of airflow through it that it looks like that would be
Yeah,
different.
it could be, but then you're gonna need some radiator fins somewhere
Yeah,
to get rid of it.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm
so
almost wondering
that's
if the backplate can sort of function that way to some extent.
yeah. Well,
Anyway,
don't know. I don't know.
it
So
is interesting because, like I said, like one of the things that really blew my
I'm not.
mind was
I
the
mean,
fact that the power and compute is all contained in the torso.
but
That's
the thing is
very
that the
compact.
power and compute is there. But remember, they don't want to run excess of 500 watts, and
No,
that's like that's the whole thing, including your actuators and everything. So
right.
the FSD chip, I think, is not going to be using more than 100.
Well, the FSD hardware for on the car, I believe, is up to like 120, but you have to divide that
Is
in
that for
half.
both? In half?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
the
so
thing.
it
You have
could
to
be
divide it in
60.
half, so it'd only be about 60 or 70 watts.
So you get the battery packs, which is a little bit warm, but not that much. I mean, it's you're only drawing 500 watts from it, which is a pretty small
Right.
amount.
Well, but
And
when you charge it, that's when they heat up for real. So you have to be,
that it might be, but I would think during normal usage, it probably is okay. So yeah,
right.
so who knows? Maybe for charging, they have a coolant loop that they plug into and then
Yeah.
allows you to charge. That's
Oh, that
possible.
would be interesting. Okay. We don't know where the charge port is, by the way. It's not
Yeah.
obvious. So open butthole might be a thing.
hmm
So
hmm
anyway, and then this was very impressive. The
Yeah, so obviously the full body control and the use of the hands to maintain, because right there's no
right.
way that thing is able to maintain its balance without the hands forward. So
Yes,
you
absolutely.
can look at that, and again, this is where the foot sensors are also very important because it can feel its center of gravity going back. So if you actually
Right.
attempt to do this on yourself and you're going down there, you can tell when the weight is on your toes versus the weight is on
Right.
your heels.
Right.
And you know when the weight starts falling on your heels, you're a little bit nervous you're going to fall back, and then
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
naturally to go forward.
You don't want to
So it's
suddenly just,
getting it
yeah,
knows exactly where the center of pressure is. So you're trying to figure
right.
out, it's like, okay, just go to the heel back there and draw a straight line up from the heel, vertically up,
Right.
and ask yourself how much of that mass is in front of that and how much is behind it,
Right.
you know?
It
And it's just,
looks
it
slightly
looks like,
unnatural
it,
because I believe that there's more mass in the torso than humans have because we have our
yes,
lungs, so they're relatively light. So I
yes,
think it's actually it looks too far back for a person, but I think that's because the center of mass is
but you've
actually
still got those
much higher.
actuators there. You
Yeah.
get the actuators, you got, half
Yeah.
the upper leg that's back there. You've got part of the torso behind there and then part of
Right.
it in front. And of course, the torso is very heavy because that's where the battery pack is. So you're right. It's a
Right.
little bit more. And then it
And
does have its arms that it's putting out forward.
one interesting thing is that Dylan Loomis, the electrified, he because he was a trainer and he said that he thinks that maybe it's learned from trainers how to do this move because trainers do the thing where you stick your fingers out at the end as like kind of like a just part of that squat
hmm
mechanism. So
hmm
because otherwise it really, the fingers don't add enough center of mass change to like matter. So why not keep them balled up as a fist? But he was saying that he thought maybe it was learning from actual videos of trainers or something.
Then that's an interesting insight.
Yeah,
And the
it's a
other
really
interesting
interesting
insight
insight.
is this is a training room.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is. I mean, like I
Look
said,
at
he's
it.
going to be swole Optimus. He's going to start doing curls soon. So
Yeah, I
he's
was
got
looking
all
at some of
kinds
those weights there. I'm like, I'm not so sure Optimus can lift those. So pretty big weights.
Yep. So anyway, but very impressive movement. And it's also not jittering a lot. You don't see that like kind of oscillating
hmm
movement that you saw a lot of times with earlier versions. And
Right.
of course the hands.
Right.
So
Now, again, we would, the faster 11 degrees of freedom. So the hands are definitely moving far more naturally than we saw before. But again, they haven't added more servos and they haven't changed the number of degrees of freedom. So
right.
they were always 11 degrees of freedom. And that is because you have the two knuckles. So each finger basically has movement down here and then movement in the
Right.
middle.
Right.
And then the thumb had a little bit extra. So basically each finger has two, and then thumb has an extra one. So 5 times 2 is 10, plus the thumb has an extra one. So
Right.
that's where the 11 is. There's still only 6 actuators in there.
Yeah.
But they clearly changed the design. And when you look really closely, especially when you blow it up, and if you look closely at the knuckles, you're able to see the springs that are in there. So
Yes.
you'll see the
Yes.
springs that cause it to come popping on out. And in some cases, if you look really closely in there, you might be able to see what looks like a band going through there, which is probably the tendons that are being pulled
Right.
by the servos.
Right.
to cause the fingers to close up. But yeah,
Which again is very similar to
Mhm.
human
Mhm.
hand, except of course we don't have servos in our palms, but in terms of the
Right, right,
fingers
right.
being pulled by
And now the
tendons.
fingers are all the same length. You know,
Yeah,
unlike my fingers, they're all the same length.
right,
And it seems like that rather than putting it along the arc or that little curve that they had before, it looks like they
right.
decided to make them all even for some reason.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
maybe that just was a way of getting rid of the stickiness in their mechanisms. That
right,
was
right.
maybe they were trying to get too fancy with it and it was causing problems. The other thing
Yeah.
I kind of wonder is that if they've designed the mechanisms to be angled a little bit, because I noticed when the fingers when they're closed, they're like this, but when they open up, the fingers seem to spread out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Now they
Mm-hmm.
don't have that control. They don't have what I like to
No,
call live long
no,
and prosper kind of mode. They can't do that. But it
right.
seems like they're spreading out just because that's the way the mechanism may be designed to do it. But they
Yeah,
don't have enough control that you would be able to do something like play the piano by spreading your fingers out to where you want them to be. They're just like
right.
where they are. You can either
Yeah.
clasp or open.
So Optimus definitely could be a worker to use tools, but will not be an artist playing the piano. So,
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
although
mhm.
Elon did say it would be able to thread a needle within a year, which is a pretty impressive
Which is
feat.
pretty impressive. So the other thing they must have done, they must have designed the fingers since you don't have like the movement of the index finger back and forth to
Right.
be able to get the thumb to touch the index finger. It has to be
Yes.
designed just right. But then again, the thumb is able to go back and
I
forth.
think that's
So
what it is.
maybe
I think the thumb
so
moves.
the thumb is
Yeah.
probably able to go in and touch all the fingertips if you want, because the fingers can't do it. The
Right.
fingers are constrained to just doing this, and then the thumb has that extra degree of freedom to allow that. But
Right.
you won't be able to like, get it to touch it in precisely a certain way you want. You'll just be able to come in and touch them. Even then, I can't do it. I don't have that much coordination either.
Right.
So you could just touch, 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 touch.
Yeah. One other thing to quickly note is when we saw the bot walking in the lab where the other one was hanging, it had its shoulder stuff off. So you could see
Mhm.
these mechanisms, but here, of course, you can see that there is actually some sort of a cloth covering to make sure
Yes,
that it's not.
exactly. Basically to get rid of pinch points.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
you can't get fingers in there to get caught, and you can't get dust and other particulates in
Right.
there that can jam up the mechanism.
Plus, it just
I'm
looks
not sure.
cool.
Yeah, I'm not sure what IP rating it is. It's not going to be like IP56. It's going to be much lower,
No,
but
no.
they have some that talk about, openings that are of a certain size that will allow certain size things to get in there, and also one that makes sure fingers can't get in there. So
Right.
once it gets below that, then it means it's a little bit safer to make sure that you don't have pinch points. Now, there's still a couple areas of potential pinch points in there, and that can eventually be resolved also by some covering, probably the same covering over the wrist if you want.
Right. Right. Yeah, because this area right here looks like it could still be problematic because
Yeah.
because there's
And,
access, you could put your finger right in there. So,
and while we're there, and this is what
Mhm.
I want you to see, because we almost have a pretty good view there. Before the wrist mechanism had a bar that kind of came along where my wrist is, and it stuck
Yes.
out pretty wide. And it was
Yes.
there because you had the two actuators that were parallel to each other going all the way back towards the elbow where they're
Right.
mounted. Okay. If
Yeah.
you look at it now, you'll notice they are slightly tapered in. They are angled in just a little bit. They're no longer parallel.
Yeah.
They're doing that. And if you look at my hands right now, if I keep them parallel, you see how my fingertips are far apart. But just by angling them this way, you see my fingertips can get closer. And what they've
Right.
done is they've now made sure that the attachment point down by the wrist, that bar that's there, that lever mechanism that they have, is a little bit shorter. It's a little bit smaller
Right.
now. And I like that. It's like, what they've done is that it actually looks a bit more human that way.
Yeah.
The lower arm doesn't look as bulky and as ungainly as it was before. And it
Right.
means the wrist is tapered just a little bit. So it'll be better for access. It's less likely to snag or get caught in something. And it will be easier to cover up, because eventually it
Yes.
will get covered up. But when it was sticking out before, then you're basically going to have this thing walking around with a swollen wrist. So
Right.
I
Right.
like the fact they cleaned it up. So what they've gone through is that they've made refinements to the mechanisms. They haven't replaced them. And like I
Right.
say, the only radical change might be that the elbow that they flipped it around. And even then, I'm not 100% sure. So
Right. Right. But it would make sense because there is a lot more room for that, but it also makes the forearm pretty complex in that case.
yes,
So,
yes,
but
which
and of course
is
the big thing being the head. The
what
fact
I'm thinking is that for me, it's like, wait a minute. If that actuator is not actually in the upper arm, up where the bicep is, then what the heck's in there? Because the thing that makes it
Yeah.
rotate, that's actually up in the upper shoulder, in
Right.
the upper one. So that lower part is attached to the bottom of that actuator. That means it's dead space. That's where you'd want to put the actuator. So the actuator has to be in there. I can't see any reason why it
Yeah.
wouldn't be there, except that covering just is odd. or there's something about, or maybe they moved the attachment point way forward or something like that. And the other thing is that you would like to have that mask up higher, because then that means when you put your arm out, you're not having to provide as much torque to keep it out. But if you move that mechanism out, now it's heavier, now you're going to sag a bit more.
Right.
The only reason I can see that maybe they did it is it might have had something to do with the harnessing and the cabling that they're thinking of. It somehow simplified something,
right,
especially with that twisting mechanism in there. So I've got like one argument on why you'd want to do it, but like all these more arguments against why you would not.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm like, I'm not sure. And it was only when I saw that picture, I'm like, oh, maybe they did do it. And so we'll leave it for like, for everyone at home, you know, it's an assignment for the reader or the viewer to go back to that.
It's a tough assignment because you have to do it from the same data we have. So there you go.
Yeah, cut it out and then blow it up and look at it and see if you can tell.
Right. So, and then of course, let's get to the lovely when it picks up the egg. Yeah. So this is cool. I, by the way, because I'm a geek, counted the I went and blew it up and counted it, and I got 6 by 5 was what I
6
could
by 5. I get 6 by 6. I think it's 6 by 6.
I could have missed a 6.
I mean, you might only see 5, but as it kind of goes up and down, and then I looked up on the right, and I'm pretty sure that both the thumb and the index finger have the same number. I thought the thumb might have higher resolution because it's a little bit bigger, but it seems to be the same.
Right.
And I was wondering if it goes all the way down, but I think it's a square pattern there and not like a rectangular one. And it seems to be 6.
Yeah, and it does not appear that it goes down past that, but of course it might just be that the egg where it's picking it up is not showing it.
It's not showing us enough. Now I also looked at the different colors, and I'm even more geeky than you. I think I counted, including black, 7 different colors.
Okay.
So I'm thinking that, you know, is there 7? Maybe there's an 8th one in there, because it seems like why 7? Why not make it 8 bits? So 8 bits. I was surprised it was 6 by 6. I was expecting 8 by 8. But
yeah, it does seem, but again, it could be just the fact that it didn't activate those other ones, because I would think 8 by 8 also.
Well, when I looked around, you saw enough that was kind of activating it that I'm pretty sure to where the edge is, and it didn't look like 8 by 8 would fit on there. Based on the size of those pixels, you would run out of room on the fingers unless it wrapped around or did something like that. So it looks like it's at least 6 by 6. And again, I feel at that resolution, it could probably read Braille.
Yeah, probably. And what are we looking at? ×5? Well, actually ×10, because if there's the middle pads also have those, maybe they're lower resolution ones on the middle pads.
Whether we don't know if they have them, if those middle pads might just be slip surfaces. That's all.
So in that case, you'd be looking at a resolution of 360 pixels per hand, or 720 for the whole bot. So it's pretty low resolution. And the reason why that's important is because that's bandwidth that has to be processed. But you know, if you compare that to an HD camera, even like 720p or something, it's a tiny amount of data that's relative to vision. So
yeah, so 36 times 8 is like how much, you know, and so you would just do it as bits.
Yeah,
that's not that.
And then a resolution of 8-bit resolution for 256. It might not even need to be that much. Maybe it's only 4-bit resolution. But you know, but you start thinking about that.
Even in the color, because it's showing at least 7 colors there. So I'm thinking there's maybe 8 bits of resolution there that they actually have.
Well, but that would only 8 colors would only be 4-bit, right? No, 3-bit. So anyway.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily 8 bits. It could be less. You're right. It might be 4 bits.
So that, I mean,
which might be why there's 7. So there could be 7. Yeah, okay. Yeah, maybe.
So anyway, but yeah, so maybe the 8th is actually just nothing, right? There's a 0 state, it has no pressure, and then there's 7 colors. So, or because it's pinching the egg, it might not be doing it really hard. Like maybe if it picked up a cup, it would grip it harder. So there might be more levels that we're not seeing. But
yes, we're not seeing.
You know, even being generous and saying it's 8-bit resolution times 720 pixels between both hands, assuming both pads have all that, it's just nothing. That is a tiny amount of data bandwidth that's being added to all of the other stuff. So easy for it to process. That's the long and short of that.
So basically, you're right. Probably 3 bits for each one. Yeah.
Right. But I'm saying even if you're generous and say 8 bits and it's got 256 levels of
and what do we call those? But you don't call those pixels.
Uh,
'Cause
Tuxels? Tuxels. They're tuxels.
Tuxels. Yes, 30
Four
36
skulls.
tuxels. 36 tuxels. 3 bits.
There we go. I'm sure the Tesla team has a name for it, but anyway, but yeah, so I mean, that's cool. And then of course there apparently, I believe, is some audio processing. I'm not positive about that, but it wouldn't make sense that they wouldn't have at least built in a microphone on it, because you're going to want to have a speech interface with it eventually. So someplace probably buried in the soft cloth area up here, they would put a microphone. So I have no idea what this is. Is this like a little egg poacher or something?
Oh, yeah, I think exactly. I think it's what you use for egg poaching, because there's positions on there to be able, and it steams it or something like that.
Yeah. Look at that. I mean, that's it. You notice as it closed, it was like, it's not exactly perfect, but that transfer, the handoff is beautiful. Plus we can really see the hand. So you can see some cabling that
you see the cabling is routed really nicely. It's routed through the plastic covering, the white plastic covering. You can see the loop that's in the back where the wrist rolls.
Right here.
And you can see how it kind of comes through, and it's just enough to go through, and is maybe it's able to retreat back in there. And they snake it through really nicely so it gets in there, because now that you have, obviously you've got the 6 actuators in there, so you needed to give them power. And you now have the
and all the force
all the sensors, the force sensing, right?
Yeah.
But they're probably, that the 48-volt architecture, that's like, what was that, gigabit kind of data rates that they were talking about through it. So it's like, whoop, they're probably using the same architecture there to be able to grab the data and transmit it.
So
and
they wouldn't be able to
doing a lot of multiplexing.
They wouldn't be able to use an ether loop with this, but certainly they could use something like an Ethernet connector for point to point or whatever. So yeah, but anyway, so I mean, this was the most impressive part of the whole thing, was watching it.
Yeah, and right there you can see the knuckles really well when they're exposed, and when you zoom in on that, you can see that clearly the spring mechanisms that are in there.
Yes,
that allow it to spring back.
Right. So, but let's just rewind that just a hair. But anyway, watch how the thumb and the forefinger kind of like oscillate back and forth as it's closing in. So it's not quite perfect yet. It's like, so it's like as it's working, but really, really close. So, and then, so mount points here. It kind of looks like this is the structure right here, this white part.
That's the structure.
That's not fascia.
Part.
Yeah. So if it's
that's a
not aluminum and that's plastic, that would be shocking. Maybe they've just sort of coated it to make it look like the plastic around it, just to make it look prettier.
I don't know. Maybe.
But this is still aluminum. That's
there's going to definitely be some aluminum components in there in some places, and I'm wondering, whether they just put a sleeve in the plastic for where the joint is, to do most, where your wear is going to be. But even then, that sleeve that goes in there is going to be transmitting forces to the plastic over time and could cause the plastic to deform. So that's why it's really hard to tell what that material is, though it certainly seems to match everything else, which is definitely plastic.
Yeah. But anyway, but it's really cool to see how that's structurally like attached, and it becomes the pivot around which the wrist joint can maneuver itself. So and then I believe that's about it, right? Because then we get to the dancing. So no, one more walk.
Okay, stop right there. You see, remember the white component I was talking about? We don't see it
now.
It's
missing. Interesting. And he's also got like a little back shield here now, which wasn't
and so the back shield may cover up the hoist points and everything else. So that is probably a different version. So what we saw before, it was without the covers. And then whatever that white thing that was on there, that may have been something for data collection or for some other purpose that they had on there. It's not normally a part of it.
Man, where this thing charges is really, you know what? He does have a stop button up here. I think it's just black now, not red.
There's a button there. There's something there, but it's hard to tell whether that's a stop button or not,
I would imagine. I mean, if I was going to put one there, I'd put it there, but
it's still there. It's like, still, I wish they would make it red.
They're probably like, it goes against our color scheme. Again, this is a concept vehicle in a sense. So, they may eventually, for safety reasons, have to make it red, but I'm sure they want to keep it in the color scheme. But what's really interesting to me is that this backpack, it looks almost molded. There's like, you can see slight ripples and stuff in it. So
Well,
It's
if there's ripples in there, could it be for cooling? Does that mean
yeah, maybe.
it's a radiator?
Hmm.
I can't really see it. It just looks totally black to me. But you know,
Yeah.
if you are seeing what look like veins or fins on there,
No,
then
it's just
that
very
would be.
slight ripples and they're vertical.
Mhm.
They're horizontal ripples in it. So it looks like I'm just wondering if it's not perfect stamping or something for that particular
Mhm.
part. So
It could just be for rigidity. You know, you put some sort of
true,
shape in there
true,
just
true.
to keep it rigid.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And right now you can see it's just bolted on. It's just like a whole bunch of bolts that are running through it. So it's like take off the pack and access the hardware
Mhm.
underneath there. So, and then again, the girdle is just so impressive that it's just that one piece now. It's just like that's everything. It just locks the whole body into place just with that one part
Yeah.
without needing any
Yeah.
kind of pelvis. So,
Mhm.
and again, we're seeing really good hip motion. That tipping as it's walking is really nice. I'm not teaching character animation in the spring. If I was, I would actually show them this video because it shows it so clearly because of the way that because it's so exposed. And then of course we've got this, which is fun. And doing
Yep.
the wave and everything. So yeah. So anyway, it's a very impressive video. And so the idea that I had at the beginning that we've sort of talked around is just I think it came from you and you said you don't put the Tesla logo on until it's basically a shipping
Yeah,
product.
usually, yeah, when you're building prototypes, you know,
Mhm.
waste your time and effort to put a logo
Right.
on for branding purposes or anything else.
Right.
You know, it's something you usually save towards the end when the you know the prototyping's over with and you're ready
Right.
to go into what you consider to be the final version of a real product.
And what you
And-
can see here is I'm reminded always of Steve Jobs' quote of Wayne Gretzky, and you know he like the skate to where the puck is going, and it
Mhm.
looks to me like all we've seen in the past year, with the exception of maybe Agility, which has their
Mhm.
their robot, but everybody else has kind of gone the silver cyberpunk Terminator
Mhm.
looking version of the robot, and Tesla just sort of leapfrogged in terms of design, but also in terms of usability, because this version of the robot, especially if these are plastic and not metallic, means that there's going to be a little bit of give. So if you bump into it, it's going to be safer. It's got the cloth parts on the elbows and the shoulders, not and then on the feet, not so much on the legs yet, but I'm assuming they'll probably cover those up too as well at some point.
Where they
But
need to. Yeah, they could also put something around the pelvic section, you know, literally wear
right,
kind of a girdle around there that could
right.
be a protection.
But it's
Just
moving very rapidly towards a robot that can exist with humans
yes,
without needing to have cages around it, which is what
yes,
you currently have to have
right,
for
right, right.
that type
All
of
the
thing.
other robots, I was like kind of the idea of having it in a workspace I was comfortable with because it didn't look like they were that threatening. They were cobotic in nature. And
Right.
now here we go. It's, you know, it's also cobotic in nature. They've cleaned it all up and they put it on a 10-kilo diet. It's amazing.
Lost some weight. Yeah, I was saying that there's a lot of humans that would probably appreciate having losing 10 kilos.
Yeah,
So
well, let's find out what the Optimus diet plan is.
well, it looks like basically just remove your weight.
Squats. Do a lot of squats.
Squats.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what it is.
squats.
It's clearly a squat program. So
Squats. Yep.
squat and eating lots of eggs.
And eggs. Yep. High protein. Yep. High protein diet with lots of squats.
So there we go. So anyway, it looks like if I was another robotics company, I would probably be like, damn it. I would have
Mhm.
seen the video and just been like, oh man, come on, guys.
Yeah,
So
they leaped ahead. Everyone else is still doing the plodding and the walking, and you
right.
can see there they go. Something's more natural, and just give it a few more months of training data, and it'll probably be moving along pretty quickly.
Right.
So right now,
Yeah.
it's about the speed that you would need to be functional in the factory to
Yeah.
do most of the operations that are going on. It's not too slow right now, and the hands seem to be pretty quick. So yeah, I think you're going to see it doing useful work in the factory next year, just like Elon said. And I
Yeah,
can't wait
and
for that video.
who was it who was stating that the big advance in the new version, the Model 2 next
Mhm.
generation vehicle, was going to be that there's going to be Tesla bots on the line, working it. And I was like, well, yeah, that would not surprise me at all that that's sort of
yeah.
built in as an
Yeah,
estimate of how you're going to build it. So
sure. And I could see that them looking over at, like, S and X line right now, because, they don't have like the high volumes going through there, that they can
Right.
go in and start testing it out on some of those workstations, and then, having it doing useful work, and then eventually deciding, okay, let's switch it over to the 3 and Y
Right.
in Fremont, and maybe eventually in Texas. So
Yeah.
when that video drops, that's the one that's going to move the needle. That's when everyone's going to say, wow, yeah, this is really, this, it's not just some demo videos. It's really doing something. And then everyone's
Right.
going to say, yeah, it's saving money now. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And whether Tesla leases this or actually sells it to consumers, this version of the bot looks like something you could have close, not quite, because there are still some pinch points and stuff, but it's really close to a form that I could see living in a house with me and feeling very comfortable around
Very,
it.
very close. And like you say, it's just some coverings that would take care of most of the problem. Maybe,
Right.
there's probably some more engineering and more ideas that they have. And remember, they're really thinking about this bot's going to be working in the factory. So they're
Right.
focusing on what's going to be good for that. And then they're going to learn enough, and they probably already have ideas like, how would you change this to make sure it's going to be more friendly in a home environment?
Right. Right.
Either they know the answer right now, or they're confident they will figure out the answer as they get more experience.
Right. And of course, the one giant thing that we still have never seen is what they're going to do with the face. Are they going to put some sort of a curved screen on there with some sort of high resolution display where it can actually be a happy face or something? Or is it going to be text or
I
nothing?
think
Will they just leave
there'll
it
be some
black?
sort of text display. I don't know if they're going to go with a happy face. If they do, I hope they do it right, because
Yeah.
several others tried doing it, and it was worse than Uncanny Valley. It was just kind of like, just give me data. Yeah.
Right. And the big thing is that it looks very much like we're moving towards XAI and Tesla creating a relationship. And the obvious output of that is to have Grok built into TeslaBot.
Even though Grok says it has no interest.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Someone
If you ask
Grok
it,
that. Yes. Yeah. Someone's like, no, I'm not interested in going, being embodied in Optimus. And it's like, okay, but he just makes things up anyway. So
we'll see.
Yeah.
It's probably upset because it needs the extra degree of motion in the head, so it can do this kind of thing.
Right. Exactly.
So,
Oh, yeah. That would be a very Grok move. Yeah.
exactly. So we will see. But I'm looking forward to the day when you can get one of these things and talk to it. And if you're in a factory situation where you can say, what are you doing? And it can answer the question, or you can say like, well, go pick up that part instead. I need that right now. And there's just a very seamless like communication between the bot and the humans. So that seems like an obvious addition onto the rest of this thing. So
Who knows? Maybe you see that AI day.
yeah.
Whenever
that could be something they're saving for AI Day. So yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway, we will find out. In the meantime, all the people at Tesla AI and Tesla Robotics are probably laughing at the stuff that we got wrong. And they're like, oh, if only they knew what was actually going on. Yeah. So anyway, so sorry about that, folks. We're just doing the best we can with the clues that we have here, but we're trying. So yeah. All right, Scott. Well, thank you so much again for coming to me from so far away and joining and talking about all this stuff. Super exciting. It'll keep feeding us the breadcrumbs as we go till we get bigger announcements and everything. But this was kind of a bombshell that was dropped, I think. Agree?
It was. I agree. It was, wasn't expecting it at that time.
No, it was pretty crazy. All right. Well, anyway, everybody have a lovely day. Make sure you follow Scott on X. I will put his link in the description as always. And everybody, I don't know. We'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
Yep. Cheers.